Okay, the next item is item number 4, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket at 221 West 79th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, docket number 16-2265, block 1227, lot 28, a Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Clarence True, built in 1895 to 96 and altered in 1953 with the construction of a 2-story commercial extension designed by S. Walter Katz. This is an application to legalize the recladding of the 2-story extension without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits and to replace windows.
Good morning, Commissioners. William Neely with the Preservation staff. If we could get the picture of the designation photo. This is the building at the time of designation. It is on the north side of West 79th Street, approximately mid-block. At the time of designation, the designation report noted that the 2-story commercial base had been built out in the 1950s. The designation report does not describe the cladding. Based on staff's experience, we surmise it was probably a structural pigmented glass, such as a vitrolite or Carrara glass. The designation report went on to note that the storefront infill had been replaced prior to designation, so it was not historic. We get the current condition photograph up. Okay. The work before you today, the work that has happened is the glazed cladding has been removed without permits. The storefront infill was replaced without permits, and this awning that you see was installed without permits. Subsequently, the tenant at the ground floor got a staff level approval for a storefront that's compliant with the rules for this building in this historic district. The application before you today, and you'll see that in the presentation, they provided an illustration of the conditions with the approved storefront. What's in front of you today is the legalization of the stucco work at the 2-story base, and the applicant will be talking about some modifications to the finish, and they'll be also showing a proposal to install new windows at the 2nd floor. Go back to the beginning, and I'll turn it over to the architect to elaborate.
Thank you. So I'm Alan Berman, I'm architect, and I represent the owner of the building. So again, I agree with everything you said. Sometime in the 50s or 60s, this glass mid-century cladding, maybe in the 70s, was removed before the current owner owned the building. And in its removal, let's go back, what would actually I actually enjoy as well as a mid-century design. In its removal, it's hard to see in this picture, but basically they have stucco block here, door for the building and a door for the tenant that don't match, half glass, and it's just a cacophony of junk, basically. So what the owner is proposing, and these are some of the stores in the neighborhood, actually, that's my office right across the street. So that's how we got together. So we're trying to be more historically accurate. We're trying to go back to actually the beginning when, if you look at what is the shoe store in the corner, which is, what's the shoe store again? It's, yeah, DSW, thank you. So we want to go back to more historic, full glass storefront, and the proposal looks like, so that's the existing conditions. Weird entry to the building, different entry to the tenant, semi-glass storefront, that's the existing, not very good. This is a neighbor, which we took some direction based on talking to Bill, that at least, let's make this infill that was put up 40, 50 years ago more appropriate, more symmetrical, more appropriate to the history of the block. This is just another example. This is Blondie's. Again, a lot of people took the block, concrete block, and stuccoed and created lines to give the idea, I guess, of limestone block. It's prevalent throughout the whole street, except for these guys that took a bar and put glass block. That's a different story. Here is the proposed change that we, at least the storefront, we got approved at staff level. So we wanted to symmetricalize, is that a word? Yes. Both sides, so that both the entry to the building and the entry to the tenant were exactly the same. And we wanted to put back an all-glass and aluminum storefront. We wanted to also put in 2 canopies, not one canopy indicating that you're going into the building, which is both commercial and residential, and the other one that relates to the actual tenant, which is going to be a chocolate store. We also wanted to cut the canopy back so you could at least see the party walls and how somehow these 2 stories tie into each other. And we matched the fenestration of the setbacks here to the new fenestration of these operable windows above. We also propose cleaning up the stucco work, repointing it, and refacing it to make it look like it's a great shape. The canopy again would be open on the side. And there's some colors that we're thinking of. Most people on the street had that sort of stone-looking masonry stucco finish. We were actually contemplating and interested in actually doing a slightly darker color. I can't think that's it. So, questions?
Questions? Questions?
Yeah, so,
Yes, Roberta?
so did you look at other finishes? You're saying the other buildings are stone,
Yeah, they're not, well,
or they're fake stone?
They're fake, yeah, they're basically, obviously concrete block or brick that were all put up in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. And all across, all up and down the street, they're just stuccoed and scored.
So you want to legalize the existing stucco, you're not doing, you're not saying you want to do new stucco?
Well, we would like to, do a new facing on the stucco, clean it up, give a new layer of stucco and repoint and clear all the lines up. It's, it's not in the best of conditions the way it is.
So by cleaning up, you're saying you're going to scarify the surface, you're going to apply a new smoother stucco?
Yeah,
You are going to re-stucco then?
yes,
Can we go back to this, right?
yes.
Is this a stucco finish? No.
Yeah, this is across the street. So
And if
This-
I can
yes.
jump in, commissioners, this particular building at the time of designation also had a, what was believed to be a Carrara glass cladding, and that was approved to be removed by the commission in a public hearing. And the stucco that you see was approved. Having seen the stucco at both properties in the field, it's a little hard to tell if they're indeed true 3-part traditional cementitious stuccos. Definitely what you're seeing at the subject property, 221, has a bit of a glossier appearance, whether that's the nature of a proprietary stucco that was used. This architect wasn't involved with that work, or was a painted finish. It's a little hard to say. But what they're proposing would constitute sort of a repair to the current stucco as opposed to taking it back to the substrate and rebuilding it.
So,
Okay. Right. Any other questions? All right. Yes, testimony. Mark Diller?
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Diller from Community Board 7, member of its Preservation Committee. We are always concerned about legalizations, although in this particular instance, we were not as concerned as we might be, for 2 reasons. One is that from past experience, we know that the standard for legalization is not simply to penalize someone for having failed to follow the rules, much as sometimes we might want to, but also because some aspects of this were in fact subject to a permit. And so there may have been a gap in the approval process, but it wasn't a wholesale ignoring of the landmark and our brief here. Our committee and our board had some real affection for the original glass design. It's actually quite handsome for its era, but that's gone. And so, alas, we are left with the choices before us. We particularly liked the design of the ground floor with the symmetrical arrangement of the projecting display, if you will, and then the entranceways on either side flanking it and recessed. We thought that was not at all atypical, in fact, quite typical of this kind of side street retail that you used to find more of, actually, in our district. And so we thought that was an appropriate arrangement of the space. We also appreciated the rearranging of the fenestration on the second floor, so it's, I think the mullions, I think, are aligned with the heavy elements of the projecting storefront, so we thought that that was an appropriate and careful and somewhat sympathetic approach. We're never huge fans of stucco, but it would be, in fact, setting a precedent as opposed to deviating for one to object to the use of stucco on side street storefronts, especially a wide side. I think on the other side of it, well, actually, no, on one side is that Blessed Bar. On the other side, there are a number of storefronts that do use some manner of stucco or some other unfortunate material, so it would be difficult to object to it on that basis. All in all, we found that that we could support this as reasonably appropriate to our historic district. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Carroll?
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. West 79th Street between Broadway and Columbus Avenue is a patch of side street retail set within the ground floors of townhouses and apartment buildings. This corridor derives its character from the quilt work of signage and storefront treatments from different eras, such as the Dublin House's 1934 neon sign or the 1950s glass black storefront that was illegally removed at this property. We understand you didn't do that, but when I wrote this. HDC laments the homogenization of the stucco treatment applied at 221 and asks that the glass storefront be put back and this legalization be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Max Yeston?
Just for the record, Michael, don't worry. Everyone knows there's no way I could take you on outside. So, Max Yeston, Landmark West. The committee finds the new facade design generally acceptable. However, reducing the width of the anodized aluminum mullions on both the window at the second floor and at street level would be an improvement both architecturally and for the benefit of merchants and customers. Despite the fact that the LPC will be examining only the facade and fenestration, it is disconcerting that the storefront alterations are being reviewed only at staff level. Storefronts are a crucial component of the street-level urban experience in historic districts and therefore warrant as thorough a review as the remainder of the facade. Therefore, we would like to comment on the storefront. The awning as sign band should be replaced with a sign band as sign band, or better yet, with signs in the glass of the storefront. We question the need for the proposed fixed awnings as they will unnecessarily contribute to long-term maintenance costs and will detract from and add visual clutter to the building plane's overall appearance. We recommend the applicant be encouraged to eliminate this aspect. On a final note, whether or not the legalized recladding of the two-story extension will be an improvement, it does not change the fact that an illegal alteration is going unpunished, and this was, of course, before I ditto to what Kelly said before. When property owners ignore the landmarks law and make changes without the Commission's guidance and consent, all too frequently the results are at best unremarkable and at worst destructive. In either case, the practice of legalizing alterations after the fact in essence penalizes property owners who often go to great lengths to comply with landmarks regulations by rewarding those who flout the law and results in a general degradation of the law's purpose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more speakers? All right.
Question?
Yes, Roberta.
So have we, do we know, I don't remember actually reviewing a project that had that glass, the Carrera glass panels before. So have we ever asked that they replace that on other projects? I'm just speaking of past. Have we ever? And did the owner, I guess, look at what that would entail?
Yeah, Bill, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, that particular project was an approval back in the late 90s, and the consensus at the time was that because that Carrara glass was also put in, we don't have that designation photo, but it was this building, was also put in the 50s. It was so late in the use of Carrara glass the peak period was in the 20s and 30s, inspired by Art Deco design. And, you know, there are some examples of those in New York City. By the time you got to the 50s, it had sort of fallen out of favor as a high-style storefront facade treatment, but was used more for retrofits. So back in the late 90s, it was the Commission's consensus is that it didn't represent a kind of the high-style, significant use of the material.
Can you go to the image of the back painted glass facade?
Well, we have it for this building.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for 216, I don't. But this is it for the current building. Now, again, the designation report doesn't describe this material. So we're sort of surmising based on our experience with the building across the street and just how it looks in terms of being reflective, fairly rigid, that it was indeed glass as opposed to metal or some other sort of rigid glassy material. But again, the designation report didn't call it out specifically.
Yes, yes.
That designation report.
Yeah.
I don't remember when we designated the Upper West Side. I believe it was in the 80s.
And neglected to mention what the exterior material was.
You know, this was so,
It was all,
It was just rhetorical. Okay, so, but that was what it was at the time of designation.
Right.
and it
That's
changed.
around dated from the early 1950s when this two-story base was added.
And other buildings in the area, though, are stuccoed were stuccoed at that time.
The ones that got the bump outs, as you can see here in the historic photographs, originally storefronts were just punched into the limestone bases, but when bump outs started to appear, they were largely stuccoed. I don't know if we have any better photographs. Indeed, Blondie's across the street is a stucco that was in place at the time of designation. The reveals are actually a polished metal strip that's set within the stucco. The stucco was used in a variety of ways when these buildings were bumped out. This, of course, is original. It's been painted.
So
But
maybe
the
we
stucco was the predominant material for the two-story bump out.
Or maybe we need better stucco.
I think that's what it seems like. The existing stucco just looks so terrible, but maybe we can ask staff to work with them to just get a better level of stucco. Yes?
And as much as it might be preferable to replace with Carrara glass, the only Carrara glass you'd be able to find now is salvaged from a demolition somewhere, but not a.
No one makes it. All right.
I think the key has to do with, go back to that image you were just up before, whatever that place is, the two stucco examples. That one. And I think that the issue is really not just the finished quality of the stucco on this building, but the design and the detail. It's the difference between the image, the building on the right and the building on the left is the building on the left uses these kind of cheesy rustications as wallpaper, and none of the architecture responds to it, and it's like, all right, well, I don't know what else to do. I'll throw some lines across the thing like my neighbor did, and that ought to make it all good, right? Whereas at least the design on the right, which is Palladio is not getting excited about competition from that, but at least it has an internal cohesiveness that's not disruptive. The subject building is much closer to what's the name of the restaurant, or the one to the left, the Nails Place or whatever it is, Chinkies or Pinkies or Linky, what you were saying,
Yeah.
Tinkies. What was it called?
Blondie's.
Blondie's.
Yeah. Which is
So
a
it's a lot closer to Blondie's than it is to Alec
Which is a restaurant.
Goth or Alec. I mean, it's got a lot. It doesn't. It's got a grid pattern of stone sizes or faux stone sizes that don't relate to the building. They don't relate to anything I can see, and they certainly don't relate to the fenestration of the proposed storefront. So I mean, I look at it as if this were an application for a new storefront renovation to remove the black glass material and put in something that was appropriate, would this be appropriate? I don't think the answer is yes. I think it's a nominal improvement over what was there, but that's not the standard. I think that one must look at, what you have basically is a very horizontally oriented, modernist proportioned second floor window. You have a kind of Art Deco-y kind of profile at the top. What are you going to do that's going to work with that? I don't think this does. Also, I would just ask that they look at the sidewall, which is exposed here, and at least address it in some way. Right. I think that's the east sidewall, west sidewall.
That's the east facing side.
East, okay. So that they at least consider it in some manner and present it to us. It is very visible to the public.
Okay, why don't we ask them to restudy the facade and particularly the details of the stucco and put some clarity to it, because it seems like it has no real, I don't know, where it's drawing its inspiration from, except for the next door, which may not be the best example. And we'll ask them to look at the end wall, and they can come back to us. Okay? All right.